You guys can see my screen. Please leave a thumbs up again. I don't know if I have seen. Perfect. Okay. If you hear any background noise, please forgive me. Okay. So we'll get started because the Zoom session is only for 30 minutes. All right. Let me open the slide. And this is me. I'm basically working in Deloitte Consulting Southeast Asia, Malaysia for now, and I am residing in Kuala Lumpur. The topic for today is EKS, specifically design considerations for production workloads. And the agenda for today is we'll go through some of the core components of Kubernetes, and then we'll explore what EKS is. EKS is basically the managed Kubernetes version. Then the main topic is design consideration, and we'll go in depth or as much as possible, as much as Zoom lets us go in. Then we'll demo how to create a cluster, how to play around with some of the services of EKS. Then we'll clean up everything that we have created for this demo because I don't want a fat bill in my credit card. Prerequisites, some basic understanding of what microservices are in general, what are containers. And if you want to follow along as to what I'm doing, you need to have an AWS account and you need to have either management console access, or you need to have your access key and secret key ID for communicating with your AWS account. Then you need to also have AWS CLI and kubectl, 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 whatever you call it, installed on your computer. Why is Kubernetes and EKS so important? There was a recent survey done by CNCF. CNCF is where Kubernetes is managed right now. When Google handed it over to CNCF in 2015, 84% of these responders of CNCF survey said they're running containers, 84% on production, and 78% of those people who said they're running containers said they're using Kubernetes in some form. And almost 80% said they are using Kubernetes because of its portability and scalability. You can see the stats that are, screaming loud and saying why enterprise, whether they're small, startup or medium enterprises, why they need to have Kubernetes in some form. And the fact that Amazon.com itself is running EKS for some of its major services is a testimony as to why you should use Kubernetes and specifically EKS, because some of the heavy lifting that we as enterprises do with respect to managing Kubernetes is taken up by Amazon through this EKS. The other customers of EKS include Snapping, HSBC, GoDaddy, just to name a few. Let's get into Kubernetes, and this is not our important topic, but I'll give you a brief idea of what Kubernetes is if you're just getting started with it. Basically, it's an orchestration engine for managing your modern applications. By modern applications, I mean applications running on microservices and running on containers. Core components of Kubernetes, it's basically divided into two components. One is called the control plane. The control plane consists of your Kube API service, Kube scheduler, controller manager, etcd, and then you have your data plane. So that's how Amazon calls it. These are the client side services, Kube proxy and kubelet. Then you have Kubernetes cluster creation options. You can create Kubernetes clusters on physical servers, virtual machines. You can create it on public cloud providers like Amazon, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, or you can use the managed services like that of Amazon, which is EKS for this topic, or AKS Azure's and GKE Google's. We'll also understand what are Kubernetes objects, like what is a pod, what is a service. We'll not go in depth. What are deployments, namespaces, what are daemon sets, what are replica sets, and so on. Now, EKS. EKS is a managed Kubernetes service by AWS, and what Amazon has done is it has split this Kubernetes cluster into two components. One is the control plane, the other is data plane. Control plane is where most of your server components run. If you see, Kube API, scheduler, controller manager, etcd. These are all part of your control plane, right? And this is the compute part of your cluster. Most important aspects like Kube API, you need it to interact with all of your Kubernetes services. Scheduler to schedule which applications get scheduled on which node or which server, and controller manager to interact, communicate with various of control plane components. etcd is basically a key store for storing your key value data in the control plane. And then you have data plane, which is nothing but your client side, the consumption side, which consists of your kubelet. Kubelet is nothing but your agent, which helps you communicate with your control plane. And kubeproxy is a DNS service, which helps you resolve your pod endpoints. For example, if you have a service called service.svc.com, it will have behind the scene an IP address, and kubeproxy helps you resolve those names to your IP addresses. What are the available options for deploying EKS? You have either managed EC2 instances, or you can go on AWS managed Fargate, where you just have to create your Fargate profiles, which is nothing but your just YAML file. You give it to them, they'll deploy, manage everything, control plane, nodes, and everything. Then high availability and scaling. They have high availability built in for the control plane. That is, the control plane components are deployed across 3 availability zones, which takes care of your HA. And we can deploy auto scaling group via autoscaler, which will let you scale your pods horizontally and vertically. Then it also gives you integration with some of the downstream services like your load balancer, Route 53, AWS certificate manager. Now the most important part of our topic today, design consideration. Like most of people, including me, when I was starting off architecting EKS, we start off with the getting started guide on AWS documentation. We see the sample guide. It becomes so easy for us to copy paste. You'll see in my demo, if we survive that long, how easy it is to create a cluster. But the most important aspect of creating these clusters or running your production load goes in thinking design. What are the different things that you need to consider even before you spin up a cluster? For example, should the cluster be accessible over the internet, or should it be accessible only in your corporate network? Many customers complained that the Kube API, which is part of your control plane, earlier was accessible only on public network. Now in 2019, Amazon corrected this and let you run your control plane inside your own VPC managed by the customer. But as an architect, it is left to you to decide how you want your EKS cluster to be exposed. Do you want it to be accessible only inside your corporate network? For example, if you're running some business critical applications which only your internal users are using, and you don't need your traffic to go outside your corporate network, even if you have your business users who will jump onto a VPN connection to access certain applications, you don't need your cluster to be accessible over the internet. That's one of the most important design consideration to make before you start off spinning a cluster or creating cluster. So as you can see in the diagram, you have one cluster on your left side. Let me go there. So this cluster is your internal cluster, and it does not leave your VPC. The traffic stays within your corporate network. Whereas this cluster, the control plane is exposed. The Kube API server is on internet. You can communicate with it, and the applications that you deploy inside your worker nodes will be accessible over the internet through a load balancer and Route 53. So this is one of the most important consideration to start off with. The second important consideration, which many people tend to ignore when they start off with EKS, is what type of application are they starting to deploy on EKS? Is it business critical application? Like I was telling earlier, would it be accessible only inside your corporate network? If it is a non-business critical application and accessed by non-corporate users, should you still need to have it inside your corporate network, or should it be accessible over the internet? So you need to decide what type of applications you are going to deploy in your EKS cluster. The third thing is environment isolation. Now I have seen this couple of times. Many people try or tend to run multiple applications inside just one cluster, because EKS guarantees you can scale horizontally, you can scale vertically, and has a uptime of 99.95%. So that sort of makes people think, why not run my multiple applications inside just one EKS? Why do I need to worry about running each application in its own EKS? Well, the problem with that is, despite you having the option of scaling both vertically and horizontally, you would want the applications to have segregated access to each other. Like I was telling, if you want one application which is say non-business critical and accessed only internally, it will have its own dependent components. So you can isolate that by running inside its own cluster, and you can have a business critical application running inside its own cluster, and you can have publicly accessible websites or web app running inside their own cluster. So all the microservices, you can club them and run inside an EKS cluster. Or if you have microservices which can just need to talk to each other, they're very small, you can run them all inside one Kubernetes cluster, one EKS cluster, because the microservices themselves have just say 10 modules. The other design consideration is whether to go for EC2 workers or to go for Fargate. Now, the most important decision that goes in deciding this is whether your consideration is security, whether you want to control what goes on the server. For example, you want to see and control what patch level your worker node should run in, what worker node version they should run in. So if you want to control all aspects of your worker node, you have to go for EC2, which is manage node for yourself, right? Where you have to manage your worker node, where you have to manage the security, the endpoint security, the patching and everything. But if you don't want to do that, and if you don't have any stringent requirement, you can go with the Fargate service, which is managed by Amazon. Then integration and communication. This is again something that comes with experience, but if you are starting off, you need to read through the documentation to see, and your applications integration. If it is calling downstream services, for example, we had EMR service which needed to talk back to our cluster, and that EMR cluster, should it be in the same VPC or should it be in a different VPC? If it is in a different VPC, how are you going to communicate with it? If it is in the same VPC, how are you going to communicate with it? For example, if the EMR is in a different VPC, you need to have your DHCP option set, which is set to talk to EMR. You need to have a conditional forwarder. You need to have specific routes which end or which talk to your EMR cluster. Like you take RDS clusters, you take Redshift clusters, you take Firehose, whatever downstream service of AWS that is. If it is hosted by you, if it is managed by you and is in a different VPC, you need to think how you are going to integrate and communicate with those services. That's one of the design considerations many people tend to ignore, because again, the guilt of or the ease of getting started. Then the other important thing is about the secret management. Do you want to use a custom secret management for your cluster like HashiCorp's Vault, or do you want to leverage EKS's or Amazon's secret management using Secret Manager or SSM's parameter store? Many people that I have seen rely on HashiCorp's Vault because it is easy for them to not only manage secrets for EKS, they can use HashiCorp's Vault to manage secrets for other services as well. But AWS's Secret Manager or Parameter Store, the reason why I recommend using AWS's Secret Manager is its integration with the EKS cluster as a whole. You can easily reference the secret managers and the parameter stores secrets within your cluster. Then ingress controller, like I was telling you in the beginning, if you have your applications running inside your EKS cluster, and if you want to expose it to the world on internet, you need a service called ingress controller, which acts as a broker between your service endpoint and the public internet. So what it does is it takes the traffic coming from internet and it takes it down to your service, which is running on a node. So you can see the traffic coming in from load balancer, then it goes to a target group, and these paths are denoting microservices. And based on your URL, for example, if you're using amazon.com/products, that will go to this target group and that will go to a specific node port, which will take you to a specific pod, and that pod can have a specific microservice which will give you, say, maybe beauty products which are running in microservice A inside a container B. And the consideration that you need to make is, are you going to use AWS's ALB ingress controller, or you want an open source Nginx ingress controller, or you want Ambassador, Istio? There's so many options, but you need to consider how you're going to use, how your application is going to behave. And if your administrators or if your DevOps team is already using Nginx, perhaps it becomes very easy for them to get started with Nginx ingress controller. But if you have a team which relies heavily on AWS to manage the services, they can get started with AWS ingress controller, which gives you a pretty neat interface. All you have to do is define your ingress policies or ingress YAML files, and they'll just let you expose your application to the world. Then logging and monitoring. Again, it comes with experience, but if you refer the documentation, you'll be able to make a fair decision on which logging software or which logging service to use. For people just getting started, most people prefer CloudWatch. I recommend Splunk for logging, and for monitoring, I would say go with CloudWatch and Prometheus, since Prometheus is like a synonym when it comes to monitoring for Kubernetes. Lot of enterprises, small and big, use Prometheus for monitoring, but you need to decide which one is most suitable for you. For instance, if you're already using Sysdig or Datadog, or you're already using Prometheus for other monitoring, you can just use that, since most of your engineers are already aware of the interface, how to navigate. Security, this is the most important aspect, which Amazon promotes a lot about. You need to decide how you want to provide security to your EKS cluster. Do you want to have IAM users who will authenticate against your EKS cluster, or do you want them to authenticate with LDAP credentials by integrating your Active Directory services with your EKS cluster? Based on the design that you consider for your EKS cluster, the complexity increases or decreases. So you need to decide how you're going to let your customers or let your users interact with your EKS cluster. For example, you can have a dev team for whom you want to allow only the LDAP authentication to communicate with your EKS cluster, whereas for your DevOps team, you can have service accounts, or for your super users, you want to have IAM user which can interact directly with the EKS cluster. That's an important consideration to make when you get started. Version controlling, packaging, and CI/CD. Like, how do you want to package and deploy your applications? If you're someone who is natively building everything on AWS services, it makes sense to get started with Code Commit. You can use the entire pipeline of AWS's developer tools like Code Commit, Code Build, Code Deploy, and it will take care of all aspects of your CI/CD. But if you're someone who already has a cloud agnostic CI/CD setup in your environment, like you want continuous delivery using Jenkins, and your version control is on Bitbucket, and you're deploying through Helm packages, then you can do so. But the design consideration has to be made before you start building the EKS cluster. If you are with me till here, which I hope you are, I can show you a demo of how to create the EKS cluster. I have basically checked in all the steps on GitHub, and I'll not be using PPT for the demo purpose. So if you're still with me and just want to see what the cluster setup looks like and how easy it is to create a cluster, but most of the heavy lifting is involved in decision making, in considering various design patterns, in considering the various architectural patterns. So now let me get started with the demo. I'll quickly switch over to my GitHub page. So this is my GitHub page, and I have all the steps written in just in a text file. So it becomes easy for me to copy paste. Uh, for the sake of simplicity, what I've done is, because the cluster creation itself takes 45 minutes, anywhere between 20 to 45 minutes, I have created a sample cluster just before the demo started. So I've created a cluster, I've created a node group. Some of the options have changed. For every 3 months, if I'm correct, the upstream Kubernetes service releases a minor update, and Amazon complies with it. From the Amazon EKS compliance perspective, it maintains 3 versions and deprecates 1 version as soon as there is an upstream update on the upstream Kubernetes service. So I had created a cluster, and what I had done is I was interacting with my Kubernetes cluster. I say kubectl get svc. I need to specify a namespace. So I deployed a sample service, my service, but we will go through the demo so that you guys are aware of how to deploy a service and how easy it is to create a cluster. So most enterprises that I have seen go here, click on getting started guide. They pick whatever tool that they're comfortable with. Most people are comfortable with the console. They look at this, they copy the commands, they copy the CloudFormation template, and they get started. Now, the most important aspect that you need to understand is the getting started guide is kept for you to be able to easily spin the servers, spin the cluster. But the crux lies in beyond this getting started. Like if you see creating a cluster, what is the Windows support? What are the machine learning supports inside your EKS cluster? What compute you need to choose, and what is the managed group looking like? All that lies beyond your getting started guide. But most companies that I have seen and worked with, they come here and they like this page and they get stuck with it forever. So let us get started with the demo of creating this cluster. I'm going to create in fact, I have already created an IAM role. And since you know IAM is a global service, I won't be able to create a second service with the same name, and I would want to retain that role for the demo. Then we'll create the CloudFormation stack, which spins up VPC, subnets, internet gateway, NAT gateways, and everything. So let me go here. And I have used North Virginia region. Let me create it in Oregon. I'll go to CloudFormation. Click on Create Stack. And it says Infrastructure CloudFormation. Choose this template. You can name this is a pilot or a demo cluster, or if it could be a pilot for you. Like I was telling in my design consideration, you need to check or think what is the IP address block you want to consider. For example, every pod has its own IP address. Every container running inside a pod has its own IP address, which means a lot of IP addresses are going to be needed. So larger the CIDR block that you choose, better for you. And you have to ensure that the CIDR block that you choose, if it is going to host a private cluster and is going to have private services, you need to choose the private address block according to RFC 1908 standard. I love it. They've removed it just for me. So I'm going to create next, and it checks for everything just to verify if any of these resources have a existing conflict. I'll click on create stack. Let me quickly show you what it does behind the scene by looking at what it has already done in North Virginia region. So what it does is it creates a VPC. It creates two subnets, two private subnets and two public subnets. It creates a route table. Then it creates two NAT gateways. It creates an internet gateway, right? It creates a security group, and it also creates a VPC attachment. If you see the output, you'll see what is the most important output for this stack. You need the security group to allow connectivity between your control plane and your data plane so that your worker nodes can join your EKS cluster. Then these subnets are the subnets where your worker groups can communicate with control plane. And this VPC ID is where your EKS's worker nodes are residing. So this cloud formation is creating these resources one by one. So it's going to take some time for it to create those resources. Let us just validate if it has created anything so far. I have kept the AWS account clean so that we are able to see every resource as it gets created. Like it has created our VPC with the CIDR that we chose during our initial setup. And then subnets, it should create two public subnets, two private subnets. We'll have route tables, and then we have an internet gateway to allow connectivity with our private internet. Then we'll have our NAT gateways. If you see, they're still getting created. It creates two NAT gateways for high availability. Let us check the security group. Yeah, this is the security group which is attached to your control plane. We'll create a control plane when we set up our cluster, but we need to be aware of this security group and the security group ID. We'll go back to our cloud formation. Still says creation in progress. Let's see the events where we have reached. Still creating the subnet, or probably it's dependent resource. Let me show you the cluster until then. This is my existing EKS cluster. kubectl get nodes. This will get me, okay, spelling mistake. This will get me the worker nodes that are part of my EKS cluster. If you see, the status for the worker node should always be ready, which means these nodes are able to talk to my control plane. At any point in time, let me go back to the control plane. Yeah, at any point in time, the worker node sitting inside your customer VPC, this is nothing but your worker node, should be able to talk to your EKS cluster for you to be able to deploy any application on the EKS cluster. So since my worker nodes are all showing ready, that means they are able to communicate with the control plane. Let's see what are the namespaces available. So this is my test namespace, which is there in the getting started guide, creating a namespace. I have created a namespace. Namespace is nothing but a virtual cluster inside your EKS cluster. That is a logical way of separating different services. For example, you want team A, which is working on, say, module 1, to not to interact with team 2, which is working on module 2. When I say interact, not directly meddle with each other's code, you can control that access for respective teams using namespaces. Let us see how far we have reached with the creation. Okay, it says it has completed creation of our stack, and three important things that we need is a security group, subnet VPC IDs, and the subnet groups. So let us go to the next step. Review, create. This part is done. The next part is creating the cluster itself. You have two options. One is using EKS's EKS which is the command line interface for EKS. The other thing is using the management console itself. I'm going to use management console for ease. I'll go to each services, Kubernetes, Elastic Kubernetes Service. Earlier, EKS was part of the compute stack here, but they have now moved it to a service called container. Let me show you. You see this container service. They have moved this EKS over there. Not important, but just letting you know. So I'll say the name of my cluster is EKS demo. Next. And here you get to choose what version of Kubernetes you want to spin. The reason this is important is if you have an existing EKS cluster, it becomes important for you to migrate to the same cluster by the method of lift and shift. If you're running on EKS 16, version 1.16, you can lift and shift the entire cluster on 1.16. This is the role which I created in step 1. I'm going to use the same EKS cluster role. I'll just click on next. If you see, by default, it has chosen my default VPC. I'm going to use the VPC which I just created in my second step, or the CloudFormation output. And it has by default chosen the subnets which I wanted. And it will give you an option of choosing the security group. Since I want my worker nodes and my Kubernetes EKS control plane to communicate with each other, I'll use my custom security group. I want my cluster to be accessible over internet. You have three options, like I was telling in the design consideration, whether you want the cluster to be publicly accessible, whether you want it to have accessibility on both public and private network, or you want your cluster to be accessible only on your corporate network. You can control that during the cluster creation. You can change these parameters even after cluster creation, so you don't need to worry about these. You also have an option. For example, if you choose public, you can also restrict access to a specific IP, probably your corporate networks, route tables entry. You can go here, advanced, and you can allow a specific source. But for now, for this demo, I'm going to leave it to open to internet. I'm going to nuke this cluster anyway. I'll click on next. You can enable access. This was a sought after feature which Amazon received from several customers. They want to see the logs, how when you're creating the cluster, how the API server is getting created, and what are the audit logs, how is the authentication happening, how is the control manager working, are there any issues with the controller manager, are there any issues with the scheduler itself. So Amazon gives you the option of capturing these logs and to be able to see them in your CloudWatch. So I'm going to choose all of these logs for this demo, and I'll press next. Let me just take the latest version of EKS, that is 17. I'll leave everything else the default. And I'll click on create cluster. This cluster creation will take at least 30 minutes. So I don't think we should wait for the cluster to get created. I will, if at all it gets created before we check out the other steps. I'll continue going through the demo steps. Otherwise, I can show you what I have done so far. So we are at the EKS cluster creation step, which is here, cluster creation. The next step is configuring your kubectl. I have already configured my kubectl to talk to my EKS cluster. So what it does is it takes the kube config when I run this command. When I run this command, kube config AWS EKS, you have to just give your cluster name and it will add these details in your kube config file to be able to interact with your EKS cluster. I don't know if people are having difficulty in listening or are they hearing a lot of noise. Let me just see the chat. Okay, I have time now. Okay, 7 minutes left is what it is saying. Okay, so you have to basically set up your 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm left with 4 minutes. Let me quickly go through these steps and I'll not demo anything because this cluster creation is going to take time. The next step is setting your kubeconfig file. Basically, it will give you the authentication mechanism for you as a client having kubectl to interact with your cluster. Then you need to add your worker nodes to your EKS cluster, for which you need your role, which you need to create again by attaching these three permissions. You need these three permissions to be able to, for the workers to add themselves to the cluster and to be able to use the CNI plugin, which is used for your inter-pod communication, and to be able to pull Docker images through ECR. Then you go, the steps are pretty simple. You go here, compute, you create a add node group. You need to add the node group. The important decision that you need to make, like I was telling it, what type of image are you going to use? What is your EC2 instance? And how are you going to interact with your EC2 instances? You also need to choose what is your, in your auto scaling group, how do you want your EKS cluster to scale? What is the minimum number of EKS nodes you want to have, and what is the maximum number of worker nodes do you want to have? So after that, the steps are pretty straightforward. Then at the end of the demo, I was supposed to clean up all the resources, which I will do post this discussion. So thank you so much, guys, for joining in, because I don't think I have much time. If you have any questions, I'm going to upload this recording on YouTube because I couldn't record directly on YouTube. So let me know if you have any questions. You can drop the questions on chat right now. If you don't have any questions, I think we are good. So we were here at the conclusion earlier. So in conclusion, you have to make design considerations for your applications before building production workloads on EKS. Consider most of the things or include as many things as possible, like VPC, your EC2 instance types, your AMIs that you're going to use, the auto scaling group minimum, maximum, and desired instance sizes, and whether you want to deploy in managed nodes or you want to use EKS with Fargate. Also, you need to engage AWS support teams right from the beginning. AWS support really helps you in understanding the EKS concepts, as well as will give you best practices in implementing EKS in your infrastructure. Then the other thing is you need to understand the shared responsibility model of AWS. When they say EKS is managed, you need to understand what part of EKS is managed by Amazon and what you are responsible for. Then before you start finalizing the architecture for your EKS, you need to conduct several pilots and iterate over them until you reach a perfect, or until at least you reach a design which meets your criteria. You need to pay special attention to communication with the downstream services, like we saw earlier, your EMR, if you have a Redshift cluster or you want to forward logs through Firehose, all those nuances need to be kept in mind when designing the EKS cluster infrastructure. And also when you start off, when you're doing your piloting, you do analyze the architecture that you're going to implement. And after you implement your pilot, you do your postmortems and understand what are the learnings, learn from them and iterate over. The most important aspect of implementing anything on Amazon is about the documentation. AWS documentation is rich and they have very clear documentation. So you need to read through. The problem which most of us as architects or cloud engineers do is we look at the documentations, we practice them once or twice, and then we stop there. We don't go through the other linked documents per se. So you need to do that. Thank you so much again for joining today.